Hello and a very warm welcome to ET Studios. I'm Hemanshi Tewari and we are joining you from the ETCISO Annual Conclave 2024 in the beautiful city of Vizag. Now this panel is powered by eMudhra and we're going to discuss two important critical points of modern enterprise security: zero trust and digital identities. To talk about this and much more, we are joined in by our cyber experts, our panelists. Please join me in welcoming Kaushik Srinivasan, who is a co-founder at eMudhra. Kaushik, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, Krishnendu Dutta, Head of Information Security at Decathlon. Krishnendu, thank you for joining us as well.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Uday Deshpande, CISO at L&T. Thank you so much, sir, for joining
My
us
pleasure.
today.
Thank you.
All right, so today we're going to discuss about zero trust and digital identities. You know, as there's rapid digital transformation, cyber threats are becoming more sophisticated, which is why zero trust is now being seen as a trusted framework, you know, that comes with never trust, always verify policy. On that note, I would like to start with all of you. Perhaps you first, you know, how do you see the role of zero trust evolving in the next few years, especially with this digital transformation and emerging cyber threats?
Thank you, Hemanshi, for asking that question. As you know, Zero Trust is really a framework that was pioneered a few years back with the whole idea of sort of verifying every access to resource at the network level. So the whole concept of Zero Trust network access was what was prominent. But now we feel that Zero Trust is taking a much larger dimension, right? The dimension of traceability and verifiability. And if you look at it basically from three lenses, one, any kind of digital data and document exchange, how do you bring traceability and verifiability? So you essentially have to trade with people that you don't know. So in many ways, identity and security have to get married hand in hand in case of any data exchange, right? Two, when you start looking at it from your own enterprise IT infrastructure landscape, which is getting more complex, right? Again, how do you sort of bring the whole element of identification and identity? And last but not the least, the whole context of data privacy is becoming big. There are mandates and compliance on how do you deal with personally identifiable information, who gets access to it, how do they get access to it. So in many contexts, you know, the work that we do around the usage of digital signature technology essentially powers, you know, all of these three use cases, because inherently digital signature technology embeds identity and security, right? So we feel that zero trust over the next few years, we really involve the extensive usage of technologies such as public key infrastructure and digital signature certificates to sort of bridge the gap between public identity and enterprise identity, and then use it for sort of secure access.
Secure access, all right. And we need to marry security and
Identity.
identity. All right. On that note, Krishnendu, I would like to come to you on the same question. You know, how do you see the role of zero trust evolving in the next few decades? You're coming from Decathlon. You need to kind of protect a lot of people's data, right? So how do you do that?
Thank you so much, Himanshi, for the question. Actually, yes, for sure. I think, zero trust is one of the most essential components, in any industries that you go, especially today, as he rightly mentioned, for banking applications and things out there, it's a no-brainer. You just have to definitely have it. But, for an organization like us, where we do, process a lot of user information and all, it's very essential to ensure security at every architecture that you're building up, especially when I'm going to specifically talk about when we talk about the network segmentations. People are building up that micro segmentation in place to ensure that when an attack takes place specifically, it does not cascade to a broader network itself, which can overall impact the functionality of the network itself. And you might have to have it could definitely impact your organization to a major scale itself. Hence, at every point in time, authentication becomes a very crucial thing that you have to embed in your overall architecture itself. And that is exactly what we are definitely looking for. Second most important aspect that I also wanted to talk about, today we have different ways of authentication itself for a customer as well, because today a lot of customer accounts are being compromised, right? I mean, you must have heard a lot of e-commerce organizations where people say that, like, I haven't purchased any specific product basically, but that I see purchases on my name actually altogether. This kind of, like, compromise which is happening, and I think, like, the overall e-commerce have faced a lot of problems in terms of revenues, in terms of, like, brand impact, as we call it as. And we are supposed to kind of, like, look into these aspects itself, like, where how do we provide that kind of a user experience, at the same time how security can be embedded in terms of, like, various ways of authentication, so that we know even the customer who is authenticating to our e-commerce application, he
It's also
or she is
secure.
the right
Right
person
for-
itself.
yeah, yeah.
So I think I wanted to, like, put up on
Yeah, of
these
course.
aspects.
Never trust, always verify.
Always verify
Yeah,
itself.
on that note, I would like to come to you there. You have been associated with L&T. It's a legacy organization. You've seen all those changes in terms of digital transformation and also sophisticated cyber threats that, that has been evolving over the decades. You are there to see all of those changing things. How do you see the role of zero trust evolving, especially in this landscape?
Okay. So thanks for having me over here. If you look at L&T, we are primarily a B2B organization. We do large jobs for conglomerates, and some of them are very, very sensitive in nature. For us, the most important data which we need to protect is our IP, our designs, because some of these designs are extremely delicate, and if they fall into wrong hands, then it's going to be a nightmare. So for us, it's never trust but verify. Always trust is the mantra. So unless and until we properly identify the concerned partner or concerned designer, we will not share the content with him. That is number one. And number two is basically, how do we share the content in a secure manner? So we'll have to implement a proper digital rights management solution, so ensure that the content which we are sharing is also timed. It has got certain expiry to it. Certain content cannot be shared further to outside parties. They cannot be printed. Those kind of restrictions have to be taken into consideration. So all the solutions like digital access, rights access management, privilege identity management, all those will come into picture when we are going to implement the zero trust. So it has definitely evolved. Like he said, earlier it was a plain authentication. Now it is going to be a risk-based authentication. Earlier it was a plain FTP transfer. It has become a secure FTP transfer now. Earlier it was basically based on the trust we used to share, but now it is a rights managed share which we are doing. That is how the zero trust has evolved into the B2B organizations.
All right. Thank you so much for that insight. I would like to come to you, Kaushik. Digital identities also offer a few more layers to the security, right? So what role does digital identities play in sort of enhancing the security posture, and how they are actually different from, traditional security applications?
So if you look at digital identity, it has sort of two layers, right? One is typically what is obviously offered at the government level, something like Aadhaar, right, which is run by the government. There's a central repository to the data. It's verifiable. Anybody can sort of authenticate against a repository. And then within the enterprise, which is the enterprise identity, which typically is already digital, right? But the characteristics of a digital identity, something that the one that government has done, Aadhaar, it allows sort of any citizen to authenticate themselves with sort of a relying party like a bank, and allow the bank to get the KYC data in real time, right? So in many ways, this has been the cornerstone of digital transformation in India, but basically the rest of the world which are trying to implement similar identity programs, right? So when it comes to the context of enterprises, particularly if you're dealing with regulated institutions like banking, they always need to verify customer identity. And for that, they need to sort of rely on a trustworthy source, which typically is operated by the government, to be able to sort of get that data. So that digital identity is really the foundation of a secure digital transformation sort of program that any government wants to run, which has a cascading effect, obviously, on the private sector. any enterprise, more and more we keep having conversations. How do I really verify vendors, for instance, right? Again, you have to rely on a trustworthy digital identity. Over time, how do I verify employees that are joining me in different parts of the world? Because COVID taught us one thing, that anybody can work from anywhere. But how do you reliably verify that this is the right employee that's joining me? So all of these use cases are getting plugged into a digital identity, the reliable data, which then gets cascaded into an enterprise identity, and then you drive further sort of
Yeah.
downstream use cases.
Yeah, you know, even Uday, you were talking about the whole B space that you're operating in when it comes to vendors, when it comes to these large number of employees. How do you take care of digital identities? I mean, how do you, what role does digital identities play in kind of enhancing the security posture for you?
Primarily, our jobs are for large conglomerates. We never deal, one to one with customer kind of a thing. So our reliance on digital identities is very less.
Okay.
But we do have federated identities.
Okay.
So we have multiple identities for various landscapes. Like for design landscape, we will have a different identity. For customer support, we will have a different identity. And basically, all those identities will get will come under a single identity management framework. And over there, they will get assigned with a specific roles, and those roles will get federated as per the identities. This is what we are doing. But as far as the digital identities are concerned, at this moment, we are not into digital identity that much.
Thank you, Uday, for that insight. Of course, digital identities don't work for you that well because you're dealing with the other segment, a lot more big conglomerates. But I feel, Krishnendu, for you, it does matter, right? You're dealing with customers. You need to enhance your security posture. In your earlier answer, you were talking about how there's a need to verify the customers as well, right? They can be the potential threats. You don't know, right? Never trust, always verify, and that approach. And you were also telling me something about digital identities, that one of your social media platform got lost, and then you'll have to, like, it's a whole big process. So just tell us about that process, what happened, and also what role does digital identities play in kind of enhancing the security posture?
Sure. So, as you rightly mentioned, I think, yeah, this was one way back, like, during the COVID times, where I was trying to access one of the social media platforms, not to name it, but it was not a compromise though, but I forgot the password completely. So, and I just couldn't recover it. I tried all my best ways to do so. It asked me for my keys, and I didn't know where did I store the keys of the account. Nothing worked, like, no authentications, nothing. But very interestingly, it said that in order to get back your account, you need to use a government ID. You have to upload it, and only then we should be able to get your account back. So earlier I was a bit finicky about the process, but then I had to really get my account back, and that's why I did that. And it was just a matter of like 10 minutes. I was able to get my account itself. Yes. So I think it does plays a major role, identity, because today, if let's say, like, your e-commerce websites or any websites gets compromised due to some or the other things, this is one thing that you already have. You say that, like, what you are, what you have, and like, what you are, basically, right? These are the three ways of authentication. So when you say what you have, basically, like, you definitely have any of your identity cards that, like, you can showcase and verify yourself as an authentic user, actually. And I felt that was one interesting use case today, right? So for sure, like, coming back to your second question, I think this is going to evolve a lot. But howsoever, I still have my reservations of to how you even secure that portion as well. Basically, let's say that today, even if your IDs are compromised, let's say, like, somebody, your IDs are, like, with something else, and today we see a lot of identity frauds been happening itself, right? And it has been in the public that even the Aadhaar card once was misused for one of those users, like, to kind of get some loans or something, and it was a big case. by then you see that there was one of the major differences that was made, that was implemented, that the moment you use your Aadhaar authentication, in the next 10 to 15 minutes, it gets logged. You cannot use it again, right? So these are some of the best practices that even government knows they are bringing into it. And I think we should kind of mirror such kind of protections, identity and access management protections. We should learn from these examples, and I believe this should definitely strengthen the identity and access management in the near future. Howsoever, I say that there will be a lot of AI and ML based authentications which also might come across. Not to live in the fantasy world, but I would still I believe there will be a lot of behavioral analysis as well which will come into effect. Whether imagine Siri, you interacting with Siri basically every day, and she knows the patterns, how you interact, your voice patterns and things out there, right? And let's say a very in any specific day, you're behaving something some way where you actually do not behave, and maybe that AI can detect that there is something wrong, there's certain anomalies, the way we are speaking or the way we are behaving itself. That can be one of the indicators that we are not being able to we are not interacting with the right person itself.
Yeah, no, of course, we're going to come back to that AI, ML and all those changing technologies later on in this panel. But I want to ask you, how do you sort of balance this robust cybersecurity with a seamless user experience? I mean, you cannot compromise with the user experience
Absolutely.
as well, right? So
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
I think, see, today, you're absolutely correct. Even cyber security itself, if you build cyber security in your tool stacks, you definitely impact the user experience for sure. But looking at that aspect itself, today we have an SMS authentication. Basically, the moment you log in, you don't really have to remember your password, but that's a one-time authentication that directly comes in your phone, and you just authenticate to your e-commerce website, right? Similarly, we also have token-based authentications itself to ensure that the user, the actual user, is logging in and not somebody else, and that token is valid for certain amount of time. So that's kind of ways we are kind of implementing steps to ensure that security is factored in, not only for our employees but even for our users itself.
Yeah. All right. Kaushik, same question. How can one do that, especially when it comes to integrating cryptographic solutions?
So interesting points made. Only one thing that I would like to sort of add is today many of the companies are focusing on digital first, and in that digital first, they are bringing mobile based sort of user experience as sort of a starting point, and probably for the fulfillment of the entire journey. And when you look at that concept, right, the mobile itself becomes a fairly secure factor for not only identifying the user, but even for sort of authentication, right? And this is the space that we've been working on extensively. Is one, how do you sort of use cryptographic identities on the mobile? Because there are a lot of pilots run for basically bringing in identity wallets. So DigiLocker is an interesting example of an identity wallet. So you can sort of prove your identity through the mobile. Second, how do you transact securely from the mobile? Right. So your facial authentication, which is then backed by secure communication to the server or to the sort of fulfillment site, and then again backed by sort of cryptographic identities. So all through the chain, the idea is to sort of verify the user, identify the user, use secure means of transmission of information, but again abstract the complexity of cybersecurity at the core and sort of leverage factors that the user is already using, like a mobile, and secure ways of sort of verifying the user through the mobile, and then allowing for a seamless sort of user experience.
Yeah, very interesting points, Kaushik, and I will also talk about the regulatory framework and how it is changing the adoption of cryptographic solutions. But before that, I would like to come to you, Uday. When it comes to zero trust, a lot of organizations sort of struggle to implement zero trust in their space, right? So how can CISOs better their journey or start their journey better when it comes to zero trust adoption? How can they do that? What are those practical steps?
we need to, while we implement the security controls, at the same time we need to look at the user convenience also. So the thing is that there is a concept of reasonable security. The cost of the control, if we are implementing it, should not be more than the actual risk which we are trying to absorb. So if you consider this, then in that case, CISOs will have to basically enable play the role of the enabler over here, which means that he just said that if one authentication is not working, there are some other ways of authentication. Like if password is not working, then OTP is there. Otherwise, your biometric or Aadhaar based authentication will come into picture. Those kind of solutions need to come from CISO. Second is basically, at the end of the day, we are basically trying to protect data at rest and data in motion. So we'll have to apply the concept of least privilege as well as need to know basis accesses which are given. So CISOs will have to identify such accounts, such applications which can be seamlessly given the access. CISO cannot say that this application needs to be accessed only from intranet, this can be accessed from internet. Those days are gone. It is basically user has to access anything from anywhere. So in that case, how those applications can be securely provisioned, that is the role of the CISO which he has to play. And in that case, whatever people process related technology controls which he can bring in. So for example, if a preventive control is too much restricting, then he will have to bring in detective controls, which means that let the user access this from anywhere, but monitor his activities, monitor what he has downloaded, monitor what he has uploaded, from which location he has uploaded, at what time he has uploaded. All those things he has to monitor basically. If anomalies are found, then in that case he has to highlight to the business. That is the role of the CISO which we'll have to bring into picture as far as Zero Trust is concerned.
All right. Thank you so much. You shared about the best practices, of course, and also the challenges that come while implementing this Zero Trust. And I would like to come to you also, Krishnendu, when it comes to challenges, when we are transitioning to Zero Trust, and what role perhaps do digital identities play in kind of enabling that transition better?
So just adding to all the inputs that you have given, I will also like to kind of mention certain practical steps, for an organization who wants to implement Zero Trust architecture. The very first thing that a CISO can do is to understand the business, first of all, what kind of business you are dealing with. Is there the Zero Trust architecture has to be implemented in each and every business units? The answer would be absolutely no, because a lot of things are public. Okay. You need not have to kind of build a Zero Trust architecture, because we also need to understand that it's an expensive solution. Actually, so you need to understand what is your budget itself. A very preliminary study about the ZTNA and understand the business logic would be the first step. Step number 2 would be to identify your critical assets, which is very important. What are the crown jewels that you're trying to protect, right? As we rightly say that, if the asset worth is $10 and you're implementing, let's say, a control for $100, definitely that's not something which you would like to kind of bring in. So understand what are your crown jewels, what you want to implement, and then probably go step by step that, okay, these are certain assets which we want to protect through your ZTNA. Third most important aspect is for an organization today, I believe people talk about talents, not getting those enough amount of talents to kind of scale up the security itself. Better get a vendor basically in place. The easiest way, let the experts do their job. Actually evaluate your vendors, do a proper vendor risk assessment, explain the problem statements to them, and understand how they can help you in the journey of building up the ZTNA. And there are not too much of competition in this particular space. There are a handful of them basically, so you can choose which is the right vendor for you, who can actually help you to scale up the ZTNA in your organization. So these are the 3 specific steps. And then coming back to him, we can definitely go check it out, what kind of security we need to build in, with identity being one of those layers of authentication into your zero trust architecture
Yeah,
itself.
all right. Thank you for those insights. You know, in journalism, we study 5W1H, like what, when, where, why,
Yeah,
and how.
correct.
So this is perhaps what CISOs need to take care of as
Absolutely.
well.
Correct.
And you were talking about experts. Experts would know better, and we really have an expert here. So Kaushik, I would like to understand from you first, of course, regulatory framework that we were supposed to talk about it in the earlier question, right? So what are those regulatory frameworks when it comes to cryptographic solutions and how it changes the adoption of cryptographic solutions? If you can quickly share
So
the insights.
regulatory frameworks are slightly larger in scope and guideline. Obviously, we have the banking regulator, the capital markets regulator. They always advocate better cybersecurity posture, right? And cryptographic identities and cryptographic solutions naturally form a part of that. But again, to back to the point, I think there's really not a one size fits all sort of approach. It's really a combination of people, process, and platforms, and it's really case wise that one needs to sort of put in place. And cryptography is sort of a backbone for many things because encryption has been around for a while, probably multiple decades, and it's really the foundation for secure communication, right? So think about data at rest, data in transit, protection of data, right? Data governance all rely on some form of cryptographic identity and encryption, and that continues to evolve, right? So regulators are obviously at quite the forefront in terms of advocating newer technology adoption, but it's really a case to case kind of approach that one needs to be needs to be taken, right?
All right, you know, at ETCISO, we are talking about reinventing the cybersecurity landscape. And with the emerging technologies, like you were also talking, the whole space is kind of being reimagined. It's being reinvented. So as we are wrapping up this question, just one trend from all of you on what future trends do you see when it comes to the integration of these emerging technologies with the whole cybersecurity space? I'll start with you there. Just one trend.
Consolidation of the technologies, because that will ease a lot of burden on the CISO. Right now, there are plethora of solutions right now available, and marrying those solutions, integrating those solutions, doing the correlation of the events which are coming from multiple solutions is a big nightmare for the CISOs. If the consolidation which is happening, like currently for SASE platforms, it is already happening. It's a welcome thing for all the CISOs. So I really welcome the consolidations which are happening right now.
All right. Now, Krishnendu, what would be your prediction?
I would still say, AI may play a bigger role actually here. Okay, I don't know in what form. As I said, to my wild imagination, maybe you're talking to Siri every day.
Yeah.
She understands the behavioral patterns. So I would say behavioral patterns of a user, in terms of adding an additional layer of authentication to your traditional layer of authentication can be one of those things that we can definitely see in the near future itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Kaushik, what about you?
Yeah, more platforms,
Okay.
right? Because I think going away from individual solutions to platforms that can sort of offer that single pane of glass for specific challenges that the CISO wants to tackle is really probably...
Like he was talking about
yeah.
vendors. Why not hire a vendor who can take care of all these problems at large? Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for this really insightful conversation. I had a pleasure moderating this panel. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to our audiences, stay tuned for more such videos only at ET Studios, where we are coming to you from ETCISO Annual Conclave 2024 in Vizag, bringing all the important discussions around cybersecurity and reinventing the cybersecurity space. Thank you.